Hello and welcome to Pup Pup Productions and another episode of Rachel reading from one of her stories. This one I'm going to be reading from is from last year's July 2009 Beyond Centauri, and the story is called The Spider and the Crow. I think it's a little bit longer than what I want to read, so I'll only be reading part of it. It's a little bit longer than is comfortable reading on a YouTube thing. Anyway, here we go. The Spider and the Crow by Rachel Olivier. Published last year's July. Beyond Centauri. Spider braced herself on the edge of the web, sensitive leg hairs picking up the scents, sounds, and the flow of the breeze around her. Looking around, she took a breath and loosened her spinnerets, letting flow the new silk, long threads to catch the breeze, balloon out, and speed her on her way. Every part of her tiny little body quivered with excitement. It was bright and shiny, wholly new and ready to live a life of its own. With Mother's blessing, Spider was setting off to build her own web. Spider felt the tug, letting her know the silk was at its proper length. With a hop, she took to the air, going forth to seek her fortune. The sun was shining, though not too warm. It felt like there might be just a touch of spring rain sometime in the next day or two. Spider's eyes moved everywhere, taking in almost as much as her legs as she floated along on the spring breeze. The dew had dried most places. Trees reached high as bushes reached out. New life was growing, hatching, coming to life. She wanted to find a place with room to grow. Spider spotted insects buzzing busily over glade and began tugging on her silk to steer herself towards the edge of the meadow below. There was room aplenty there for a small spider with big plans. This was the perfect place for a web, and blushing as she thought about it, a family all her own. Spider drifted on the breeze, enjoying the feel of the wind, smells, sights, and other sensations brushing over and around her. She was thinking of the best way to build her new home when something tugged at her from above. Had she gotten caught on something while daydreaming? Looking up, she saw Crow, who had caught her string in his mouth and was pulling her off course. "Mr. Crow! Excuse me, Mr. Crow! Can you let me go?" Crow eyed her, pupils glinting hard in the sunlight, but keeping his beak firmly shut. His large wings beat the air slowly as he carried her toward the trees that she would have gone to on her own. But he was going to take her to his nest to eat, or feed to his chicks. It was spring after all. Spider twirled on her silk, moving her legs frantically. She tried to crawl up the thread, but the force of the crow in flight kept pulling her back down. She needed to be creative. Biting through her silk and falling from this height might be fatal. Could she skein out another bunch of threads to balloon on before she hit the ground far below? A strong cross breeze blew by as Crow moved on, dragging her behind. The swinging momentum knocked her around, making her as helpless as an egg sac at the end of its mother's silk. It gave her an idea. She began swinging and singing to the distracted Crow. "Da-da-da-dum, swing up high." She shifted her weight slightly ever so little, catching the breeze to swing ever higher, feeling the movements in the breeze through her sensitive leg hairs. "Dee-dee-dee-da, swing down low." She shifted her weight in the opposite direction. As she reached the apex of the swing, she shifted again, struggling to build up a momentum. Spider kept swinging, back and forth, just a little higher each time, trying to sing at Crow all the while. His pupils tracked her as she ascended first on one side and then on the other, distracting him from his original course. She wasn't sure, but it looked to her as if she were making him nervous. Yet he continued on, beak holding on to the sticky webbing of her silk. "Dum-dee-dum-dum," Spider huffed on one of her swings. Her tiny book lungs were beginning to bellow with the effort. The stimulus input through her eyes was second only to the rushing through her leg hairs, faster than she processed it. She wasn't sure how much longer she could do this, and she was almost sure she smelled something similar to Crow rushing up on them fast. It must be the nest. With a final fling and a twist, she leaped onto Crow's back, crouched low behind his head. "Hey!" It came out. "Rumph!" Crow, alarmed, began swerving through the air, trying to swing Spider down off his back. Spider let out more sticky silk to attach to him more firmly. When she knew she was secure, she worked her legs down into his feathers, to the sensitive skin beneath. She felt the powerful back muscles as the wings continued their movement across the sky. Noting where Crow was flying, Spider bit down on the left side, just nipping enough so he felt a pinch. He swerved left as if trying to reach behind and pick her off. Wrong direction. She waited until she saw a tree coming up, viewing a large nest close to the trunk and up high. That was where the smell had been coming from, though it was very quiet. She nipped down again, this time harder, and on the right. Crow swerved right towards the glade, almost turning over in his need to get her off his back. Gruff! Spider stayed silent, poised for another bite when necessary. Crow swerved back towards the nest, where Spider now saw another crow waiting. Spider bit down again, harder this time. She had no intention of becoming crow meal. Crow veered out again, beak peeking back over his shoulder as he tried to reach her. With a spin and a back wing, he lowered himself onto a limb that stuck out over the meadow and began shaking himself all over. Spider leapt at the chance, severing her silk and leaping down to the limb next to him, spinning out silk as she scrambled to the trunk. Ack! Where did you go, Spider? Crow shook his head and shoulders, looking all around for the spider he had planned on bringing back for his mate. Know where you could follow, Crow. Crow heard a small voice floating up to him from lower down on the tree. Peering down, his eye followed the sheen of silk that led down the tree to the dirt and boulders below. He saw where the little spider had leapt down, spinning out silk as she fell. Flying down, Crow peered into a crevice in a boulder where the silk ended. Vainly he jabbed his beak into the opening, trying to open it enough to grab the little spider and bring her back to his nest. But it was no good. His beak was too big to poke in. Slowly he lowered an eye to the small aperture. I'll get you yet, Spider. Not if I don't get you first, Crow. Crack! Crow laughed at Spider, flapping his wings, and settled down to wait in front of her little hole. Spider trembled in her hole, exhausted as well as angry and fearful. She needed protein, and lots of it, but not while Crow was out there watching her hole. Spider settled in, spinning a small web back in the hole where she sat, to catch what might float by. She wasn't sure how, but eventually, Spider was determined to get Crow. And that's enough for now. You can find the rest of the story in this version of, or this edition of Beyond Centauri, printed July 2009. Go to SamsDotPublishing and you'll find it there. And then you can read the rest of the story. And thanks for coming to Putt Putt Productions. Have a great weekend.